What is the purpose of government according to the Declaration of Independence? An affidavit is simply a statement of facts that should be based on constitutional law, proper evidence, facts, and truth.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Today, I'm excited to be joined by the extraordinary guest, Kirk Beck. Kirk has dedicated over 40 years of his life to educating the next generation with a special passion for mathematics and civics. He's a man of many talents, an editorialist for a major newspaper, an advocate for constitutional common law, and a former captain in the U.S. Army. Kirk is deeply committed to finding peaceful alternatives to the violence that continues to pervade in America. He's also the author of Parenting the Passive Rebel and is soon to be releasing his second book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue. We're going to dive deep into his understanding of the law, faith, and his journey in helping others stand up for their rights. Kirk, welcome to be on the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, tell us a little bit about your story and what got you into this world of politics and all the wild things that happen in this industry and in this niche.
It's America, baby. It's where we're supposed to be as we the people. I want to admit, and I want to say right at the beginning that at the end of the podcast, I have a special gift for all the listeners that are still tuned in. Now, I've always been a curious person. And my road began probably on the road over almost 50 years ago when I was with my wife-to-be. I was traveling home at 2 a.m. and a red light came on. And I got pulled to the curb and I was being cited for a rolling stop at 2:00 in the morning. There wasn't anybody around. There certainly wasn't anybody making a complaint about what I was doing. Well, like most Americans at the time, I just kind of rolled over and paid the fine. But I was thinking, well, where's this money going? I'm paying a $50 fine probably back then. And I had no idea how the process was working. But I wasn't too concerned. I had many other things I had to deal with. But later I found myself no longer in Colorado, but in California. And in California, the fines triple. So that gets your attention even more so. Now, I admit publicly to being a recidivist when it comes to rolling stops. I've never had a speeding ticket, but I get these rolling stop tickets. And again, curiosity, I'm trying to think what's going on. And one other thing took place in my life. A very close friend of mine lost her husband due to a negligent driver deciding, I'm going to take a right turn immediately from this left lane into Walmart, right in front of Joe. And Joe piled into her on his motorcycle, and he was burnt to a crisp. I went to my assemblywoman and my state senator. I took Shelley with me both times, and I queried them about the Constitution. One of the things I asked them is, what is the purpose of government according to the Declaration of Independence? Now, both of these paid employees of We the People thought that the main reason why government exists is to protect the people. I said, well, that's not what Jefferson said. Jefferson said, immediately following those precious words, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, he followed up with that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Right. Well, Joe had a right to travel down the road on a motorcycle, and somebody took his life out of negligence. When Shelley went to court, the woman was found guilty of negligence, and she turned out to be an illegal immigrant as well. And the The penalty was for her to pay Shelley $2 per month for the rest of her life. That didn't really help Shelley. And actually, after 6 months, the woman stopped doing that. My point in bringing Shelley with me is, hey, I wouldn't mind paying these fines if, say, a large proportion of it went to helping victims of negligent driving. But not one nickel went to help Shelley. All that money stayed inside government. And this really buzzed me. This is a really personal good friend of mine who is being widowed and left with nothing. And the state did nothing but award $2 per month. So I began to dig into this more and more. But as I believe in providence, I've been in California for over 35 years. So I've only gotten 5 rolling stops. Now that's not bad. That's not bad. It's not like I'm going around doing it intentionally right in front of cops. But I do get them. And I go to court and I argue what I think to be good law, but I lose. But I always learn something. But the most I ever learned was when I was on a jury pool and a man was defending himself against 17 felony counts. He was defending himself.
Wow.
As pro per, 17 felony accounts. And the first day I'm sitting right behind him and he objects to something the judge says, and the judge cuts him off very quickly. And this is a pretty mild-mannered judge, but he just lit into him. And he said, you had an opportunity to have a lawyer. You chose not to have a lawyer. And you're going to have to play by all the rules of any person in my courtroom. That's not technically correct. A pro per should be receiving some assistance by a judge. You're supposed to be a referee and kind of even the playing field. But they never do that. They detest pro pers in the courtroom and they treat them like dirt. Well, I'm sitting right behind the defendant. He's vehemently shaking his head. He's not saying anything that's going to get him in trouble, but he's obviously disagreeing. 2 days later, I'm one of the 16 that's being paneled and being questioned by the defense and the prosecutor. Well, I never got questioned because as soon as the judge got done with his caveats, he looked at me and he said, juror number 14, you seem to have a problem. What's your problem? I guess he read my body language. But for the next 5 minutes, I had the court's attention. And I had 2 problems with I've seen. The worst one I won't go into. But the other one was with the shaking of the head. I said, I think I understand what the defendant action was a couple days ago. He wants to have an attorney as a counselor. He doesn't want to give up his right to defend himself. Because I'd had this happen to me myself one time when I had an attorney. And I spoke up and the judge says, Mr. Beck, you don't speak in court unless you're addressed. You've given that up to your attorney. Your attorney speaks for you. So when I got done, the judge said, I think we need to take a brief recess. And when we came back, he politely said, Mr. Beck, you can leave. You've been dismissed. All right. But I'm curious. I didn't like what I saw in this courtroom. So the next day I came back and I sat right behind the defendant and I went out to lunch with him. And I found out that indeed I was correct. The defendant had gone out to lunch with an attorney to determine how they could work together. When they came back into the courtroom, the attorney stood up and totally blindsided the defendant by saying to the judge, Your Honor, after discussing the situation with the defendant, I have to recommend a full psychiatric evaluation. He didn't have any clue this was going to happen. So with that, he decided he was going to fight by himself. Fortunately, he got in touch with Jack and Margie Flynn. And when I went out to talk to the defendant, he told me Jack and Margie Flynn were trying to help him. That's where I met the two people who, for 6 decades, have been fighting corruption in government and in corporations by something called the power of paper. Simply the use of the affidavit process to force the other side either to answer and rebut or else face the possible loss in the courtroom. An affidavit is simply a statement of facts that should be based on constitutional law, proper evidence, facts, and truth.
Hi, I'm Nova, an AI avatar created by Gold Shark Media digital marketing agency. Ready to create AI ads that give a professional and aesthetic impression to your brand like the one you're seeing now? Gold Shark Media can help create you cutting-edge marketing projects and advertisements using our own AI software. We believe your business deserves more than just a one-size-fits-all marketing solution. That's why we offer a range of customized plans designed to meet your needs, whether you're just getting started or ready to take your business to the next level. Our plans are built with one goal in mind: delivering results that matter to you. From lead generation to social media management, paid advertising, and SEO, we have a package that fits your business size and budget. Whether you're aiming for steady growth or preparing for a major expansion, our pricing options are as flexible as they are effective. With Gold Shark Media, you get the support of a dedicated team of experts who work closely with you to achieve your goals. We deliver clear strategies, measurable success, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're in good hands. And here's the best part. With our transparent pricing, there are no surprises. You'll know exactly what you're getting and how it will drive growth for your business. We're here to make sure that every dollar you invest in marketing works harder for you. Because at Gold Shark Media, your American dream is our dream. Let us help you turn that dream into a reality. Explore our plans and pricing today at www.goldsharkmedia.com and start seeing the results you deserve.
If that be the case, it can't be rebutted. It is then taken to a notary, an officer of the court, who notarizes it and gets the person to swear under oath that everything in the affidavit is true. What Jack and Margie Flynn do that's different is that their affidavit spells out in the first paragraph the responsibility of the receiving party to answer, that not to answer when possible to answer can be actually fraud. Then the body of the affidavit is specific to the situation. In my case, I have 5 cases where I've used the affidavit. So each one's different. The first one happened to be a rolling stop, and I didn't lose that one. I'll get to that in a minute. But the final paragraph is where it really hits the road. The rubber hits the road. It says specifically that you have 30 days in order to rebut what's in the affidavit. Otherwise, everything in it can be used against you. And that you is spelled up at the top, and it's not some agency, it's a person who's at the top of that agency. It can be used against you in any court in America.
It's a very scary thing how much power the US government has, and the how much we don't really go with how our old constitution used to be, where it was more based on the people and for the people. And so what do you say to all of the bigger public figures today that are kind of leading more controversial opinions, right? And kind of maybe raising awareness. A lot of them we're seeing getting persecuted, right? So like Donald Trump, we're seeing a lot with, I've noticed a lot of Alex Jones. I've noticed with Andrew Tate, for example, big public icons like these. I've been seeing a lot of the same thing where there seems to be this kind of political attack on them, but also an attack on basic human rights and freedoms. So what do you have to say about all of that?
That is an absolutely wonderful question. It seems to me I can't judge their intention, but I've tried. I've written, I'm sure Trump gets hundreds of letters every minute, but I mean, I've tried to get in touch with people to say, remember how the Constitution begins. We, the people, not you, the elected. Your best thing that you can do in office. Well, I told President Trump, I said, listen, FDR had these Sunday night fireside chats. You need to have fireside chats with the American people and bring in people like Thomas Sowell, David Zuniga, people who can look into a camera and say to the American people, you are the problem. You are lazy. You are indifferent. You've gone through schools that don't know how to educate you properly. And now you're basically been dumbed down. There's only one thing the powerful that control our system. There's only one thing they fear, and that's the people. When the people become educated and learn how to use the power of paper, or as tactical civics teaches, establishing people's grand juries in every county in America, where the people have subpoena power, and you call a judge in, and the judge sits in the chair, and the people question the judge. That's where the
Definitely.
power is. And that's what Trump and anybody else who wants to run for office. Matter of fact, we're supporting a congressman out here in California who understands this. If elected, he will use his public position to call seminars into our county where people like me, people like the Flynns, people like David Zuniga will come in and teach the people in my county how to control government. And the beautiful thing, the absolute beautiful thing, is you don't need to win any elections. As
Very true.
Bastiat said in the law, he said, if the law can be kept to its proper boundaries, it makes no difference who can vote. I would say it even makes no difference who's elected. Because in one of my victories, I went after that assemblywoman because I told her, your responsibility is to protect our rights, not trample on them. And 6 months later, she sponsored a bill trampling on the rights specifically of counselors, pastors, priests, and an LGBT type legislation, calling what they're doing hate speech. We hit her with the affidavits, and she backed off, and the legislation died. I have a friend named Robert who is in Massachusetts, and he just told me that using this process in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts legislature adjourned with the least, this is their words, our least progressive session in history. In other words, they kept getting hit with all these paper, and they kept backing off and say, well, hey, we can't do that. These guys are coming after us with the law. And mind you, one thing I must emphasize, we hold them accountable to their oath of office. And this is like putting a cross on a vampire. When you come after them with, hey, you're violating your oath of office, do you recognize that if you were found guilty of doing that, I mean, you're definitely going to lose your pension. You'll definitely never be able to be elected official. You can't even be a dog catcher. Can't work for the government ever again. This is pretty serious stuff.
It is, and is. And what do you think makes a lot of these politicians, not just politicians, sometimes it's lobbyists, right? Sometimes it's bureaucrats, but typically it's within those circles, the bankers, right? What makes them feel so entitled and just not worry at all? What makes them say, "Oh yeah, I don't have to worry about this. I can, insider trading, no big deal. $3 million on this stock, I'll be fine. I'm just a politician. I'm supposed to only be making 60,000 a year, but it's okay. 3 million bucks, no big deal." Wait, what do you think is the big reason for that kind of? It seems like entitlement, but correct me if I'm wrong. What do you think?
One word: precedence. The
I like
precedent
that.
is
That's a good.
the
That's a
guy,
great.
the guy that I replaced got away with it for 40 years. Why is it going to be any different? All I have to be is elected one time, just one time, and I qualify for a pension that's better than any job I ever had before. So it's all about money and power. Not 100%, but probably 80, 90% of the people that go to Congress either go there with the intention of being corrupt, or they go with the intention that I'm not going to stand for anything and eventually I will become corrupt. Uh, there are very, very few that take power well. They usually, what did the wise man say? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more
Mm-hmm.
power they have, generally speaking, the more corrupt they are. Donald Trump might be a exception to the rule, but the things that took place during COVID were really just unbelievably sad.
Yeah, a
The
lot of the
numbers
guests I have on my show, we talk about COVID a lot. That usually will always come up during COVID, and it's true. It was definitely definitely scarier than a lot of my life that I've lived so far because it was the first time that you saw real authoritarianism and tyranny coming out, and nobody really knew how to respond to it. And I was in college at the time too, so I was surrounded by just so many um, peers who were just very on the left, and it was just like you were constantly self-censored.
Well, two of my victories have to do with COVID. Number one, I want people to understand. People have this idea about California that it's really totally weird. We have we have 58 counties. We have more than 40 sheriffs that are basically saying to the governor and to the leftist legislature, not going to do it. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, not statutes that are not constitutional. So when Gavin Newsom said, hey, everybody's got to get their masks on, we got to close down these stores, no restaurants should be open, we had a sheriff that said, not in my county, not in my county. He didn't enforce any of it. He said, I'm not going to put people in jail for going to church. You're crazy.
And I think that's how it
But
mostly was. Oh yeah, continue.
we had a chief medical officer who was sending his hirelings around and threatening people. And yep, they're closing down. They're closing down. They're all closing down. Well, we went after that chief medical officer. And the beautiful thing about our affidavit was we actually found code of federal regulations that he was violating in going around and doing this. There was no um, board made up to investigate, investigative board made up of people with no monetary interest in the outcome? No, it wasn't there. So we put that in the affidavit and we send it off to him. Now, Margie and Jack Flynn have said, hey, they're not going to respond. They can't respond. So when he did not respond, we then put the affidavit in an envelope with another affidavit made out to each of the 5 supervisors saying, hey, you got this guy down here who's violating federal regulations. What are you going to do about it? Well, it's usually the case, the guys that are upstairs, oh, I'm threatened. All I have to do is get rid of him? Ah, no problem. So the chief medical officer, I can leave out a lot of juicy details, but basically he lives in Australia now. He not only quit his job at the county, but he just moved out of the whole country. And it was because we hit him with paper. When I talked to my sheriff, who I know personally, wonderful guy, Chad Bianco, he said, yeah, I didn't make any sense that he would leave such a wonderful job pay-wise and go to Australia where he didn't have a job at all. Well,
Right.
as you find out, they never tell you why you win. You just win. So I took Best Buy to court also. They said I had to come in with a mask. I said, I don't have to wear a mask in your store. I'm not going to rob it. Why do I want to wear a mask? Well, you have to because it's a law. No, wait a minute. It's not a law. It's a mandate from a governor who thinks he's king. He can't tell you what to do. Only the legislature could duly go through the process of requiring masks. And they didn't do that. Well, you still can't come in. Okay. So in this case, we were going after a corporation. Now we have to travel all the way down to Glendale and serve Best Buy, its corporate offices out in Minnesota. And we did that. And eventually I went to court. People say, well, did you win? I said, I just dragged Best Buy into small claims court. I won. Because if I can do it, you can do it, she can do it, he can do it. And then they're going to stop doing that. Otherwise, they're going to have to come up with some kind of shenanigan to get this all into one hopper, and then we'll have to deal with that. Court has become a chess game for me. I make a move, they make a move. I know what their move's going to be next time, so I will prepare for it in advance. So I went to court, Best Buy. My mentors have told me, listen, don't go into the court and start arguing the Constitution and common law. It doesn't work that way. And I actually had this happen to me several years earlier before I really knew Margie and Jack, but I was defending myself in a misdemeanor case because I've done this couple of stupid things along the way. I'm not going to pay the fine. I'm not going to pay it. Well, then they suspend your license, and then you get another rolling stop. And guess what? It's not an infraction anymore. Now it's a misdemeanor. Now I can go to jail and I get fined a lot of money. So I'm defending myself, and in the process, I objected to something that the DA said, and the judge said, yeah, you need to explain that. I began to explain. He said, oh, stop. Mr. Beck, you bring up some very good points. Nevertheless, that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up in a pre-trial motion. There we go. When you go into their courtroom on arraignment or any time prior to or after, where you've had your opportunity to bring up the common law in the pretrial motion, if you don't do it then, it's too late. And I wouldn't say it's too late, but you're going to have to really know how to argue.
It's amazing how they just don't teach us a lot of this stuff in school. They don't teach us how important it is to be able to defend yourself in a courtroom, right? And, you know, you look throughout history and you look at some of the biggest public figures, good or bad, and some of them have defended themselves, right? So maybe not the best example, but the first one that comes to my head is Ted Bundy. He was a serial killer, but pretty intelligent. And so he ended up defending himself in court. And so this, when I was watching the documentary, I was like, wow, I couldn't imagine defending myself with especially those kind of those kind of crimes committed, right? So essentially go a little bit deeper on how important it is to be able to defend yourself in court and how we can go about teaching the public how to defend themselves and be able to do it correctly
Ah,
without having to go through, maybe some of the process of the rolling
yeah.
stops.
Because you don't want this to be difficult. If it's difficult, most Americans won't tackle it. It doesn't have to be. See, so I had learned how to deal with this process. So when I got my last rolling stop, which my gosh, I'm so happy now, it's like 6 years ago. The last rolling stop I got, I did exactly what my mentor told me to do. The first thing I did is I wrote the deputy a letter and just explaining to him what he did wrong. Because every stop, traffic stop, there's technicalities that they do wrong. So you bring this to their attention. Now, when I send a letter to somebody, I send it certified. So I get the little green card back and they have to sign for it. Now, police officers don't get letters from people they give tickets to. They certainly don't get a letter where they have to sign for it. So I had to sign for my letter. True to form, he didn't respond. So after 30 days, I sent the affidavit. Once again, certified mail. He's got to sign for it. Now, he may have thrown my letter away, but he's not going to throw my affidavit away. He ran that up to legal, and legal told him to do something. I'm not sure what legal said. All I know is when I walked into court, and I walked into court with a witness, because I don't trust that clerk over there. I got bamboozled once, and I learned. So I had a witness. Here comes the deputy. Now, a lot of people don't want the deputy to show up because that means your case is going to be dismissed. I was actually happy that he showed up because I'm here to learn law. He walked in, he gave the bailiff a piece of paper. The piece of paper went directly to the judge, and within 2 minutes, the judge looked at the paper and said, "Mr. Beck, are you here?" "Yes." "Mr. Beck, you can leave. Your case has been dropped." Okay. I see, I didn't have to go to court. Well, I mean, I had to go to court, but I didn't have to say anything. Maybe the deputy was looking to see if I was there. If I'm not there, then he's off the hook. The bench warrant will go out on me, and he's okay. But he saw me, and he gave the piece of paper to the judge, and the judge said I can go. Now, I don't know why I won. All I know is that I followed the Flynn procedures, and the Flynns have said over 6 decades they have 10,000 victories. I have 5. This was the one that went in my case completely the way I wanted it to go. That was one. Best Buy was a second one. The encounter with my assemblywoman was a third one. And I had a bench warrant in South Dakota that was issued 20 years ago because I didn't show up for court. They put out a bench warrant. So I went to get a gun, and they said, "You can't get a gun because you got a bench warrant in South Dakota." Gosh, I can't believe this. So I didn't really know Margie and Jack's procedure back then, but later on when I learned it, I said, "You know what? I'm going to do something about that bench warrant." Because here's the key. Common law. Is there a victim? No victim, no crime. And that's how I attacked the bench warrant. There's nobody making out a verifiable complaint against me. What's your problem? I did pay $100 bail. I don't want it back, but I just want the bench warrant removed. Sent it to the presiding judge in the county. He did nothing. Put the affidavit in an envelope to another affidavit made out to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of South Dakota. And 2-3 weeks later, the bench warrant's gone. Gone. That's the power of paper. They don't like their name on the top of the paper.
What is the secret to sales? Well, in my opinion, the secret to sales is to actually listen. The secret to sales is to solve problems. The secret to sales is to actually understand. See, what does that mean to understand, though? See, well, to understand means that you have a good insight into what these people want, aka your prospects, your clients. How do you sell anything to anybody? Well, if you look at Hormozy, you look at Ty Lopez, you look at Gary Vee, the reason they're so good at what they do is because they practice and they're constantly moving. So they have fast momentum. Andrew Tate, he always says this, like a rocket ship going into outer space. If your momentum is going forward, you can't go down, you can't crash. So if you want to sell, if you want to be able to sell yourself and make a lot of money, not just what your cap salary is at your job. If you want to do more in life, then the trick is to simply just listen and to reach out, to hustle. See, you can get as many clients on the phone as you want. You can go to Google right now and you type in whatever phone number you want for a small business. Whatever your business is, there's a lead for you. You have to show them the value. You have to make them want to buy. And at the end of the day, the reason my clients have worked with me and my agency is because we're professional. We established ourselves as a professional agency. See, we're not perfect. We know that we're a founding agency. We're just starting. But we know we're not perfect. And we know that our client is the most important thing. We always put our clients number one. And that is how you sell. You put your client number one. So if you really want to sell, then you need to not just sell yourself, but you need to sell what a good person you are. You need to sell your value. You need to sell what their results are going to be, the client's results. If you want to have more clients, if you want to have continued revenue, then it's simple. You need to listen more. You need to keep your ears open. You need to interview and talk to your clients. That's the only way you're really going to get good at sales. That's the only way you're really going to understand how to consistently make passive income with your business without having to rely on a boss to write you your check every week. If you like this content, be sure to click the link in the description below. Book a free call with my agency. If you need marketing and advertising, we are the team for you. And I love that you are doing what you're doing because I think it is important to make sure you understand that, when it comes to the Constitution, you're right. And when it comes to legalese, you're right. A lot of it is paper, right? Like when I starting my companies, technically it's all paper, right? Everything's paper. And through there, when you pay your taxes, it's paper. So at the end of the day, it really is so important to know your constitutional law and to, listen when you're in second, third grade and when they're teaching us about all of this. Because what's so striking to me is how I remember learning about propaganda when I was in like fifth grade, right? I remember learning about all of these things. We'd watch the Looney Tunes with all the World War II, all of that stuff, right? And it was always very intriguing to me. And then today we're seeing all of these different forms of propaganda. We're seeing all of these things happen where we have a tyrannical government. They're trying to take away our First Amendment, our Second Amendment. And we have all of these things happening, but still you have half the public who doesn't even see it happening. They don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. So how does that happen to a society? Is it ideological subversion? Is it just brainwashing? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
No. It's just human nature. Human nature, Bastiat talks about this in the law a lot. Human beings are always looking for the most comfortable position. They don't want to be involved in controversy. But the beautiful thing about what I'm talking about is, remember, the Revolutionary War was fought by 10% of the Americans. When Washington and his troops are hunkered down at Valley Forge, freezing, some of them losing fingers in the harsh cold, the British were hunkered down in Philadelphia, being quartered in American homes, and Americans were selling them food. Our farmers were selling food to the British. The majority of Americans during the Revolutionary War sat it out. It was that hardcore 10%, and it'll always be the hardcore 10% or less that fight for the liberty for everybody else. And the only thing I try to do is, I ever said, if I ever ran for office, all I would be doing is scolding the American people for being indifferent. And let's call it what it really is. You're a bunch of cowards. You won't stand up for much of anything unless it hurts you personally. The responsibility that we have is, if I had a, this is precious. I had a cop one time, I was talking to him, and I said, what would you do if you're walking down the street and you looked across the street and there are two men mugging a woman? What would you do? He says, I'll tell you, based upon what I know about the law, I'd just keep walking. That's a cop. I said to him, well, let me change it just slightly. The woman across the street is your mother. Now what are you going to do? Because that's common law. When the American people recognize, you hear this all the time, oh, you don't have standing. You don't have standing. You don't have standing. It's true. Under something called statutory jurisdiction, which is what we're playing under in their courtrooms, we don't have standing. But under common law, we do. You come after me, hundreds, thousands of people should be rallying for me, and they all have standing. We can stand together to fight this. But don't worry about winning elections. I mean, I'm going to vote. I hope Trump wins. But he's not. George Washington was the greatest president we ever had because he held us together for 8 years. But he was still flawed. And this guy is flawed a lot. But he does a lot of good things, as opposed to the other side, which is off the cliff now. Look what they've done to Robert Kennedy Jr. and to Tulsi Gabbard. It's like they treat them like they're lepers. And I don't understand. But here you got 50% of the Americans who are our brothers and sisters, who we are to love, that will vote for that. I can't help them much, but as I say to a lot of my Black friends, you guys need to learn this law even more than me. If the system is against you, then you need to learn how to use the system even more than me. I was talking to a man one time who was he was a kind of an evangelist to Muslims. And I was learning a lot. But then he said this. He said, you know how I look like a Muslim? Yeah, you're from the Middle East, and you're a Christian, but you look like a Muslim. Yeah, it says, that's why I can go through the TSA at the airport so fast. So what do you mean? Because you look like a Muslim? You get to get preferential treatment through the TSA? And says, yeah. Well, how did that happen? He said, it's because the Muslims know how to use the law. The Muslims have learned, and they've been taught, if you think somebody's profiling you, get their badge number, get their name, send it to us. Forget the organization, CARE. I think it's CARE. Send it to us, and we'll take care of it. And they do. They come after the police officer, they come after the agency, and they sue them. And I tell you, they've got power. But look at the total small number of Muslims in this country versus the number of people who call themselves Christian. And yet the Christians, oh God, I have to render unto Caesar. Now, Caesar's the Constitution, man. It's not the sheriff. It's not the governor. It's that piece of paper that you owe your allegiance to. I don't like to say I pledge allegiance to the flag. I like to change it. I pledge allegiance to the Constitution and the republic for which it stands. That's what I really have my allegiance to, that piece of paper. I have a quote from the Declaration of Independence that has to get into this podcast. Jefferson wrote, he, speaking of the king, he has combined with others, speaking of Parliament and the governors of the colony, he has combined with others to submit us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. And stop for a second. He's not talking about the United States Constitution. It didn't exist until 11 years later. Has subjected us to a constitution. He's talking about the common law. Subjected us to a constitution foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to acts of pretended legislation. I'll tell you what pretended legislation is.
Love that.
It's the laws, the statutes that they're passing in Sacramento or trying to pass in Massachusetts, where the people recognize statutes are not laws unless they're constitution. Pass the statute. We'll come after the statute with the law. And the Supreme Court of the United States has said more than once, American people have an obligation to treat statutes that are not constitutional as if they're not law at all. But there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. One of the first rules, if not the very first rule of common law, is to notify your adversary. So I see a potential problem. I notify my adversary. That's what I did with my assemblywoman. I went down and even talked to her about it. She remembered me. She remembers Shelley. We told you not to do that. You did it. Now you're violating your oath and you better stop. And she did. She stopped. Golly, gee willikers, what would happen if there were 1%, 2% of the people in this county doing what I'm doing? I often say,
Very true.
What would the world be like if everybody's doing what I'm doing? I know what it would be like in this county. It would be clean. It would be lacking corruption. We had one guy named Jason Hunter. The city was going to increase utility rates 10% per year for 5 consecutive years. Well, they had so many people wanting to come and talk on the subject, they had to move it from the city council to the county. And all these guys in their nice suits were down there. This is going to hurt my business. This is going to hurt my business. It's going to hurt my business. Jason Hunter doesn't have a business. He just put a piece of paper on overhead, the only person who did so, and all the supervisors looked at it. When it was over, I went to Jason and I said, what do you think is going to happen? No, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. The RTU director who ran the meeting will resign by the end of the week. What? This guy's making $250,000. He just ran this meeting. It looks like it went pretty well for him. He's going to resign? Yeah. 4 days later, our PU director resigned. Ooh, I couldn't get to the phone fast enough. Jason, what was on the overhead? He said, it was just an intercepted email from the RPU director to the university finance department that was supposed to be doing an independent audit of all of his numbers. And it simply said, these numbers are not good enough. That was it.
Wow.
He's gone. Because one guy was in the right place at the right time. Now, if we'd been ready, that guy should never have left town except in a prison garment. And maybe the guy at UCR should go with him. But they just let him leave. And that's how scandals are dealt with presently in this country. Somebody's caught with their hand in the cookie jar 95% of the time, unless they're a Republican who likes Trump. Otherwise, you just go away, take your pension with you, and you're an embarrassment to us now, so we have to get rid of you. No, that guy should have been arrested. He should have been prosecuted. There should have been no plea deals whatsoever. You're going to go to jail for 5 to 10 years, whatever it is. Now, that's the way it should be. That's the way it could be when the American people understand what we can and can do. So the number one problem in this country is Americans who think voting is their only obligation when it comes to controlling government that's out of control. They have to change. They have to grow up. And I'll tell you what, these pastors, I'll never forget reading Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. He never criticized white people one time. Who was he criticizing? He was criticizing the black pastors who did nothing to stop what was going on. And that's what we've got today in America. We've got a whole bunch of hireling pastors who haven't got the guts to stand up and fight for what's true. They're hiding behind their 501c3s, and they don't want to lose their tax exemption because then some people won't give so much money to the church. This is my 11th interview on this topic. This is the first time I've ever brought up part of the problem being the church. It is a serious problem. These are the people who are supposed to be educating us with the real truth, and they're doing a very poor job.
I love that. I love that you're giving this message because in a time where things are so wild and obviously we can see things heating up, right? We're definitely walking into World War III if we're not already in it, which I would say we're already in it. So I think it's so important in times such as these to learn how to combat a tyrannical government with lawfare versus violence, using your intellect and using the power of paper. And so to wrap things up a little bit, tell us where we can get your books and tell us a little bit more about the idea of what you're doing and why this is so important. Because I think, again, as a police officer myself, I think more Americans should be doing what you're doing.
Oh my, yes. And I didn't know you're a police officer. The reason why I wrote the book, Officer Hanson, Compassion in Blue, is because I know that the majority of the cops have a good desire, a patriotic fervor, a desire to be of help to their fellow man. But there's a lot of bad cops, and they're getting away with bad stuff. As a school teacher, 80% of the teachers I work with were good teachers trying to do a good job. But we had 10-20% of them that were bad teachers. One guy read his newspaper the whole time and turned on the TV. And I went to the principal and I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, I can't do much of anything. I've gone in there, I've yelled at him. That didn't work. It's just too hard. And that's what you have sometimes in these police departments. You have a crony system. And the good cops try to figure out how to get out and go to become a deputy sheriff someplace else where it might be better. Again, because the American people are sleeping, we don't know what's going on. One guy was able to save the entire community of Riverside, 325,000 people, a lot of money because he was in the right place at the right time. So Officer Hanson Compassion in Blue is going through a rewrite process right now. I wrote the book, took over 10 years for me to write the book. I would just wait for something else to come along. Well, that's got to be in my book. But I know the narrative, the character development needs help. So I'm getting a professional writer to help me. What's available to your audience right now at affidavitsecrets.com/influence is the template for the affidavit, that important first paragraph, that equally important final paragraph. That's available. You'll see how it's structured, because an affidavit without these paragraphs is largely toothless. But you put these things there, and Margie and Jack created that. It really makes it powerful and helpful. Now, the body depends on the circumstance. Obviously, my situation in getting the bench warrant removed is totally different than rolling stops, but it's just different. So you need some help on that. What I do on Thursdays, I set aside some time, and I'll tell you later. I have a Zoom call. People can call in, and we kind of talk about a specific affidavit, maybe a rolling stop affidavit. And we've gone 45 minutes. We just quit. I'm not going to be there all night talking about affidavit. But I want to be available to help people, because the more people that catch on to this, and we start little grass fires in Nebraska and over there in Oklahoma, and next thing you know, it's going across the country. The American people aren't sleeping anymore. The 3% of America is out to save the country. And that's all we need.
And yeah, I want to say thanks again for coming on the show. And it gave me chills when you said that, because it's very true. It always does come down to those to that 10% of Americans who are willing to stand up, learn, be educated, and to take action, most importantly, and use that power of paper. So thanks again for coming on the show. And just to wrap anything up, is there anything else you'd like our audience to know, or any other products you'd like to plug?
Well, no, I don't have any products. I do. When they go to affidavitsecrets.com/influence, they'll receive the free gift. They'll also see a little video from my friend Jerry, who really spells out the affidavit so clearly in the power of paper. But you also have a course available to you. It'll be available at a 50% discount to what is normally priced. So you can go through the course, which helps you understand where we are as a country, how this came about, and how the affidavit process can really be very helpful. So that's all. I'm very happy to be with you, as I've been with the last 10 people. I mean, every podcast and radio spot has been the same. Wow, that's really good stuff. Yeah, 6 years ago, I didn't know any of it. And I'm not young.
I love doing this, and I love talking to educated people and people who have great insights and great experiences like yours. It's definitely valuable. Yeah. We need more of it in the world, for sure. And I think that'll be, ultimately, I think that's the solution. So thanks again. And love to have you on again soon.
Someday we'll talk more about what we're going to do with the judges. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
We will do that soon for sure.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on the
Bye.
show.